what are the top ways that people can bring more joy into their daily life? Like the simple things that you would recommend to somebody.
I look at the biopsychosocial model, right?
Okay.
Biology, like your body. So you can eat things that are proven to boost your mood.
Like what?
Green vegetables, omega-3 fatty acid foods like certain fish, berries that are antioxidants, dark chocolate. You know, there's something in these food groups for everyone. Figure out what it is and just eat more of it, right?
Okay.
So, and then the biological, of course, like try to keep toxins out of your body. Certain things you can't control. You can't control your genetics and certain disease states, but you can take care of your physical health, right? Because if you have worsened physical health, you have worsened mental health. The psychological component, we talked heavily about trauma, right? And other people don't just have this, they have other things. Some people have, anxiety conditions, ADHD, and, really try to support those areas because your mind is so important, so precious, but validate that trauma. That's what everyone can do. They can start saying, listen, I went through this. There's nothing that I did. Something happened to me. Just start validating that.
Thank you for explaining that, because here's what I'm hoping as you listen, you're getting from this conversation. That there is a direct connection between the level of happiness and joy you can access in your present life right now, that feeling of being kind of meh or burnt out or blah or whatever word you want to use, stuck, autopilot, going through the motions, exhausted, direct connection between happiness, joy, that, and the fact that you are still processing the very overwhelming experiences of the last 3 or 4 years. And for many of you, you're still in a work cycle where you're in Zoom meetings all day. You're still working on the weekends and your phone is always on you, or you're dealing with the fallout of how it's impacted your kids. And it's very, very real. And Dr. Judith is here to validate that. She's here to say that it is a very real thing that is impacting people's happiness and ability to get access to these points of joy, and that the solution is very simple, and it's something that you can introduce into your life right now, which is slowing down and bringing your feelings back online. And it sounds dumb that that's the solution, but I know you're right, because I've experienced this in my own life. And last year, I was doing that and creating that time for myself. And in the past 4 months, things have been so insanely busy here at work, and with some changes, in my home life, living up in Vermont and like all that. I don't even go to the details, but that I've stopped doing all those little things that made me feel grounded and connected and alive and happy. Happier. Okay, now why did you say happier versus happy?
When you think of happy, there's a picture. This is happy and this is what it has to be. But happier, increase the points in a day. It's not about being happy, it's about being happier.
How long does this take? See, I'm so type A. I'm like, I want to know, like, if I start doing, like, what could somebody expect? Like, if somebody's in your practice, because I really want everybody to try this.
Mm-hmm. It starts right away. The moment you start slowing down and enjoying that point of joy, that sip of water, you've already increased a point, right? It's that simple. But doing it slowly and adding up the points matters.
What are the simple steps for taking better care of yourself in 2024?
So we have like the typical self-care, right? Like the halts. If you're hungry, eat. If you're angry, do something positive to self-soothe. If you're lonely, phone a friend. If you're tired, take a rest. And I added an S to it.
Okay.
For stuck, because that's what I refer to anhedonia as. Sometimes you just feel stuck, and so address the basic self needs. We think self-care is elaborate and get your nails done, but I've been in that chair where I'm like, hurry up and get my nails done, I need to go. This is stressing me out, right? So again, we're going back to the basics. Look at a child when they're drinking their milk. They're just in such joy. If we could just drink our coffee the way that a child drinks their milk, how much better would our lives be? We all have the DNA and the programming to really enjoy life, but along the way, we stop learning how to. It becomes less important. we can retrain our brains, we can get back to the basics, and we can be happier.
Is there an age at which people stop playing and stop, like, because you talked about this example of a kid with a box. Is there actually an age where this happens?
You know, it's interesting because I think I see it a lot across different industries. For example, I was pre-med. And so when you look at the pre-med track kids, they're just like, you're like, oh my goodness, like their future is going to be hard. That's anhedonia waiting to happen, right? But, you know, in other fields, like creative fields, I see play being more encouraged until, not to say creatives don't have anhedonia. I see a lot of creatives with anhedonia.
You're looking at one.
Until it becomes perform, hide your feelings. No one wants to see you sad, right? So you're doing something you love, you're getting joy. And then when it's time for the job and the accolades, it's like, well, you can never show your true feelings. Show up happy. No one wants to see a sad face. So you see this with actors, right?
Yeah.
You see actors saying, people thought I had this great life, but I was wearing a mask, because no one wants an actor who is a Debbie Downer, right? So I think it depends on the industry, but I do think certain industries breed this. Teachers, we talked about educators, what they went through. How many educators, they start off like, oh, I love what I do. And then now it's like, well, I have to stay after school and help this child, the student. You know, I have to like use some of my money to buy some products for the classroom. You know, they sacrifice a lot of their own joy because it's rewarded, right? This is a dedicated educator. They did this for their students. But, you know, these martyr type of roles, they don't feed your soul. And so I think if we, again, can go back to the basics, even if you're a teacher listening to this, don't grade those exams through your lunch break. Take the lunch break. Just one day a week, not all days. You're like, oh, but no one's doing this. And like, try it. Try it one time. The world will not fall apart if you take your lunch break. So you really have to push back on these notions.
I am so just grateful that the conversation went as deep and as profound as it did so quickly. When you sat down in that chair, never in a million years did I think we were going to be talking about the collective kind of trauma symptoms that everybody's experiencing based on the last 4 years. I want to thank you for validating it, because I see the notes and the comments and the just reviews that people from around the world are writing into us about this podcast and about YouTube. And I have been so profoundly sad about what is clearly a massive uptick in the number of people that feel numb and that feel stuck and that know that something is off, but they don't know how to access it. And so I am grateful that you just told the entire planet that what you went through over these last 4 years that you barely can remember or you don't even want to, that impacted you. And that is the barrier. And that's why you have not been feeling like yourself. And that it's real. And that there are simple things that you can do based on what you're doing with your research and your clinical practice to reconnect with yourself and to bring your feelings back online. And it's right there waiting for you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing and validating how people feel and validating what I'm studying. We all can identify universally with the feeling of love, but we also can identify with the feeling of joy, and we just want more of it.
Now you know how to get it. So you said when you feel like you belong, you have this state of flow. I would also guess that other words that people say is that they're very present.
Yep.
That their minds are not racing ahead. That there is nothing in the moment that you need to manage.
Yeah.
And that there is this peace and freedom.
Like anchoring. Like you're calm, you're anchored.
Yep.
There's the absence of the panic or anxiousness or activation.
Yes. And the activation is an interesting word, because I can think to certain friend groups that I was a part of, or certain people I was dating, or certain classes, for example, that I was taking in college, or certain jobs that I hated, where the moment I was walking into the classroom or into work or I was sitting at a table with my supposed friends in air quotes, I was not anchored and at peace. I was so active in my mind and thinking about other things and worried about something and not able to feel anchored or at peace in those experiences. And I personally believe, based on the number of people that write in and the size of the audience on our social channels and the podcast, that most people have a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute experience of being activated and not belonging.
Yes.
How does somebody know? And I want you listening to us, I want you to think about, where is the easiest place for somebody to spot this for themselves so that they can recognize a place in their life where they're not able to be their authentic self and where they get into this particular part of their life and it's very activating.
So I love this question for so many reasons. So first of all, in my book, We've Got This, I introduce this concept, which I call our core wisdom. And in fact, Mel, if you said to me, Ritu, tell everyone today, what is the number one thing that you did to bring more belonging and authenticity into your life, to bring more ease and joy and flow and peace into your life? What was that?
Ritu, tell us the number one thing that you did to bring more joy and ease and peace into your life. I can pick up what you're putting down, woman. So tell us, because I want to know.
And by the way, I'm a work in progress, everyone. Before you think like, oh wow, Ritu like really has it all figured out and her life is like perfect and whatever, I would tell you like my life feels like it's a fucking mess all the time and I'm like constantly feeling overwhelmed and. However, I am always anchored to who I am. Like I often will say, here I am anchored. The good swirls around me, the bad, the ugly, everything is swirling around me and I am anchored. And why? The number one thing that I did to bring more authenticity, belonging, and joy into my life is cultivate what I call my core wisdom.
What the hell is that?
Yeah, right. Good question. So our core wisdom is the inner knowing that pushes us to tune into ourselves and say to ourselves, in any situation, any interaction, any moment we're in, whether it's a moment of joy or a moment of feeling stressed or a moment of deep pain, whatever it is, we tune in and we say to ourselves, what's my mind saying right now? And in a moment of joy, we'll be saying, oh, I feel so good. This feels really good. Or I really like her. Like, for example, right now, I'm really enjoying this. But in a stressful moment, it'll say, oh my God, I'm such a loser. See, I'm always a loser. And I can tell he's judging me. And this is why I shouldn't speak. And no, don't speak. And I knew you didn't like me. So we hear the narratives in the head, in the mind. We hear the voice. Our core wisdom also pushes us to say, what am I feeling in my body? So let's go back to what I was sharing earlier. Belonging is a feeling. A lack of belonging is a feeling. What is the difference between fitting in and actually being who we are? You'll know the difference based on what your body is telling you. So our core wisdom says, in this moment, in this experience, what is my body feeling and sensing? And we start to tune in, we feel the stress in our chest, and we'll feel that we're starting to sweat, and we'll feel the heat on our face. And then coupled with the negative narratives in our head, like you're a loser, you suck, see, don't speak, don't be who you are, they're gonna judge you. We hear all of this and feel all of this happening. And in that moment, we leap into using our core wisdom strategies, which include, oh no, negative inner saboteur, I'm not going to let you talk to me that way. And we have our affirmations or our mantras, our self-coaching ready to go, because we're like, no way, Ritu Bhasin, stand in your power. Ritu Bhasin, speak. Or my favorite thing, Ritu Bhasin, you've got this. If you don't speak, who will? So then my affirmations and mantras start going. But then my body is still activated.
Yeah.
So then I start doing my deep breathing work in that moment. And I start this deep breathing. I take my hands, I rub it on my thighs, or I put it on my chest, rub my fingers. I feel the tears coming up and I say, cry, let it out. Oh, you don't want to do it right here because they're watching, you don't feel comfortable? That's okay. Come back to this later. It's called emotional release or emotional discharge. goes back to the activation. When we feel like we're being judged, what's actually happening in the body is that as human beings, we're animals and we're governed by our nervous systems. All day long, our nervous systems are clocking for harmful things in the environment. Back in the day, although for some people, I think maybe you, Mel, given how your early morning hikes, we're clocking for bears and forests. Okay. Most of us are not clocking for bears and forests. What's happening is, oh, see, you didn't say my name right. Or you rolled your eyes when I was speaking, or you raised your eyebrow when you saw what I was wearing, or you keep interrupting me, or I hear the tone in your voice when you're talking to me versus talking to him. Whatever it is, those disrespects, those hurtful things that we're clocking, the body intakes as attacks. It's not the same as being attacked by bear, but it doesn't matter. The body's like, see, you don't like me. And that's what causes this activation. And when this is happening, energy is generated in the body, which could show up as trembling, shaking, because we're so shocked or we're so upset, could be tears. But the problem is, as humans, we override. And so what happens is the surge of energy comes up, the activation, the tears want to start. We want to start shaking, trembling, let out a moan or a cry. But we say, no, don't do that because you'll be judged. And then we push those sensations down. Our core wisdom says to us, come back to it. So for example, I literally, after I've had a stressful thing happen, or I'm grieving right now because my mother is dying of Alzheimer's, I have all day long, I feel the grief. And I'm like, no, you're at work. Keep going, keep going. But I come back to the moment later in the evening and I'll take my memory back to my mom or whatever has happened during the day that's difficult. And then I'll put on my music, my calming music. I'll feel the tears come up and I let the tears out and I cry and let it out. Why? Because I don't want that energy to be trapped in me. But the other thing I'll mention here as it ties to our core wisdom is that I also do this with joy, because I feel like for a lot of us, we have capacity, or we spend a lot of time with the pain. And what we're not doing enough of is spending time with the joy. And joy isn't just a mind thing. Oh, this is so nice and I'm really enjoying this. And isn't this experience with my family pretty and nice? It's the actually feeling it in my body. And then the very last thing I'll say about core wisdom is that, first of all, it can be developed. The more we do it, we develop it. It's like a muscle, of course, is that we want to develop our core wisdom so that we build more settled nervous systems, so that we are more settled, so that we're less likely to be activated. And when we are triggered by the horrible shit that happens to us, we're able to address it. And so there, like many experiences of life, there is no blue pill or red pill that we can take and like, oh, look at that, instantly I am healed. It's not like that. It's a journey. But the better we get, the better and better we get, the less rattled we are and the happier we are, or more joyful, let's say more joyful.
And before we jump into the 7 questions that we have for you, I wanted to just ask you, so that we are all starting on the same playing field, what is the definition of happiness?
Do you want me to answer that now, or?
Yeah.
Okay. We define happiness, I define happiness as the joy you feel moving towards your potential. So it's both an emotion, right, that is directional, right? It's got a valence to it, it's positive, but that it doesn't stop. It's not complacent. It actually leads to seeing more of what we're capable of in terms of, our potential as an athlete or as a musician or a parent or a poet.
So do we get it wrong when we're just in our day-to-day life saying to ourselves, I don't feel happy? Like, are we talking about happiness wrong? Is that part of the problem?
I think that could be. But I think we use happy in so many different ways, right? I'm not happy with this hotel room, or I'm not happy within this moment. What we're looking for is not that moment of happiness, because it's so fleeting. If you're trying to hold on to that, it just slips through our fingers almost as soon as we define it. What we're looking for is more of an emotional trajectory within someone's life, that even when someone is suffering, they can actually experience joy in the midst of that. I mean, the reason why I love that we've conflated the ideas of happiness and joy together is that if happiness was based on the pleasure model, pleasure is fleeting. It's so short lived. We only have it when things are good. But joy is something we can experience even when life is not good. Like in the midst of childbirth, it's not high levels of pleasure all the time, but moments of joy can correspond even with the highest amounts of fear and pain we can experience as human beings. So I love that I think what we need is redefinition of what we mean when we talk about happiness. They're stuck in a single moment, but what we're looking for is what's the trajectory in that moment. That even if I'm experiencing pain, whether it be back pain or fatigue or whatever it is that someone's experiencing, that we want them to actually experience joy in the midst of that so that we can make the negative experiences, those troughs, shorter.
So maybe I should ask you, what the heck is joy? Because as you're talking about childbirth, I'm like, Sean, I don't know what kind of epidural they had in your wife, but I did not experience a whole lot of joy until the crown was over and the kid was out and I was done, with it, and they handed me the ice pack to put in my underwear. So when you talk about
Right.
joy, what do you mean?
Well, even in those moments, once we've had the baby, there's, it's not suddenly that everything's perfect again. Now they're waking us up, right? And now we're taking care of this little thing that we have no idea how to take care of. At least we didn't. And we're already exhausted at that point, right? And then the doctors leave the room. Like, what do we do at this moment? I think that we're constantly looking for that moment where like everything is great, that there's no stress, the race is finished. What we find is it never actually happens for people, because as soon as they finish the race, they're thinking about what they need to do when they get home. Or as soon as they get that promotion, they're immediately thinking about, what am I going to do now that I have this promotion? And how do I get this person on my team to become more positive? The joy that we're experiencing is that feeling like that we're not stagnant. There is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I haven't really studied very much, but I know it goes from the base, it was basic needs all the way up to self-actualization through stages of, I think it's self-confidence and self-esteem. What we find is that happiness doesn't occur at only one of those moments. That we find, and you've seen this as well, that in our travels, we go to places that are quite impoverished, where we'd assume that, given what the people that are there have, or their lack of options, that they would be miserable all the time. And we don't find that. We find happiness in these surprising places where you feel joy and optimism, even in places where I might feel imprisoned. That it's not where you are on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs that determines your happiness. It's whether or not you feel like you're moving up on it, that there's growth. And I think that the moments in my career where, even if you've written a book, I kind of thought, as like if you write a book, I thought I was done. That was the mountaintop experience. I did it. That was my baby, right? It was much less painful than what my wife went through. But like, I felt like, oh, I did it. And then you realize, wait, I kind of want people to read this. And what if people think I'm a fraud? And maybe I need to write another book, or I want to get it on a bestseller list, or how do I turn this into changing more people's lives? You realize it's not even done. You've actually only started when the book came out. And there's this sense of futility that can occur within those moments. That moment I thought would create greater levels of happiness in my life don't. But if we're able to experience joy as we move through those pursuit of goals, that's the only place I think that anyone finds it. That's why I think people can be very happy where they have very lower means, but they suddenly get some extra money, or they work really hard for something and they're able to buy their kid a present, right? Or braces, right? Or that, you write a book and it doesn't guarantee levels of happiness, but then someone tells you something about how it impacted their life. And even though you might have heard it 100 times, you kind of needed to hear it again, right? To remember that this was important, or that, you're doing something meaningful in this world. So I think that that's what it is that it's that constant search of meaning that allows us to feel like what we're doing on our daily actions is moving us up towards self-actualization, which I don't know what Maslow meant when he said that, but to me, it means my highest potential as Sean, right? As a dad, as, a husband, as, a speaker, as a terrible tennis player.
So Dr. John and Julie Gottman, they are the most prominent researchers on the topic of love and relationships. And their research has found that couples who are happy, you know why they're happy? They know how to have fun together. Well, that extends to all relationships, particularly with your family. I know that the second that you walk into mom or dad's house, you feel like you're 8 years old again. I know the second that you're around your family, even though you love your brothers and sisters, there's the golden child, there's the middle child, there's the favorite. You fall right back into the old roles. Well, here's the thing about fun. Fun lessens the stress. Fun helps you sleep better. Fun makes you happier. It makes you smarter, and it strengthens your relationships when you're having fun with other people. And you know that this is true. And look, you aren't the only one. Here's how sad the topic of fun is. Researchers have a word to describe the fact that you and I are not having as much fun as we should. You want to hear the words? It's pretty sad. Researchers say that you and I are living in a fun drought. I mean, my mouth is not just dry. Apparently, my whole life is dry. 97% of us, according to the research, and that includes you and me, wish we had more fun. 60% of adults believe that their life is just way too grown up. I know I feel that way. Don't you wish you could go into a time machine and sit back at the kids' table again and be elbowing your cousins and laughing at all the adults? Well, that brings me to the next piece of research. 73% of us miss aspects of our childhood, like birthday parties or family celebrations. Let's just talk about your own family for a second. Forget about what your relationship is like right now. I want you to think back through time. What are the best memories that you have with your family? I guarantee you, what popped right into your mind were the fun times. When I think about my family, the Schneebergers, you know what I think about? I think about game night. I think about the fact that we love playing euchre and backgammon, and we always divide up into teams. And my mom and I are a great team because we love to smack talk, and then it's like the ladies against the guys. And we will play cards for hours. Cribbage, euchre. I just love those nights. And we laugh and we're competitive. Or I can think of like another memory that comes to mind for me is wiffle ball. When my little nephews were tiny, they're twins and they're 14 now and they're taller than I am. Well, I'd get out there when they were little and I would always have to drop out of the wiffle ball game because I haven't had my bladder surgery yet. And then everybody would laugh about how Aunt Mel just peed herself. Ha 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 ha. And they'd try to make me laugh. So I would pee myself. Or when we go visit my parents, my dad always rents a pontoon boat, and not just any pontoon boat. There is only one place on Muskegon Lake where you can rent a pontoon boat. This pontoon boat is like 30 years old. We have rented the same thing every year that we go back and visit. And this thing's like chugga, 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 chugga. And the last summer when we were back there that we rented it, it died in the middle of the lake. Honest to God. But it was a blast. You know, we laughed and laughed and laughed, and my dad had to wave down a boat and get a ride. It was a whole thing. But we always have fun. And I guarantee you, when I go back this summer, it'll be that same 31-year-old pontoon boat, and we'll all wonder if it will actually be able to have enough horsepower to do tubing. Now, on Chris's side of the family, when I think about memories there, it's always fun stuff too. Like how excited all 9 cousins were when they get together. And they would spend hours and hours and hours, particularly in the winter, building jumps on this huge hill that we live on. And then they would sled on it. And honestly, the last time they all did that, it's kind of sad. I bet it was about 15 years ago. Or another memory, we had this epic lip sync battle one Thanksgiving where all of not only Chris's family got together, but all of his cousins came too. And it was every family was a band. It was this incredible battle. Absolutely amazing. Do you know when that was? 13 years ago. So it begs the question, if you always remember the fun times, why aren't we having fun anymore? Here's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about 3 simple steps that you can take to create powerful changes in your life. And I'm talking really big changes. Yes, the steps are simple, but simple over time creates amazing results. And simple is important because if it's simple, you can do it. As I already said, these are the 3 steps that led me to launching this podcast. They're the 3 steps that I used to help me start working on my marriage and making my mental health stronger. They're also the 3 steps that helped me make the move from a very busy and stressful life outside of Boston, Massachusetts, where my husband Chris and I had raised our family for the last 26 years, and make a major move and a major change to a simpler lifestyle by moving to a tiny town in southern Vermont. Now, using these 3 steps, I not only changed my life, I have reinvented every aspect of my life over the past 2 years. And today, I'm going to share those steps with you. I'm going to tell you the whole story. And I want to help you. I want to inspire and empower you to make the changes that you have been thinking about as you go about your day-to-day life. You know, speaking of life, I think about life as one long road trip. Your past right now is behind you. It's in the rear view mirror. And the future, it's right out that windshield. That's why the windshield is bigger than the rear view mirror, because we're not going backwards, people. We're not doing that to ourselves. We are going ahead. And you know what's in front of you? An open road. Every single birthday, I believe, is a mile marker on this road trip called life. It's a chance to pull over for a second and think about the open road ahead. Where do you want to go next? How fast do you want to go? How slow? Who do you want to have in the car with you? There's endless metaphors around this, and it helps me think about this major topic of reinvention and change. Now, I love birthdays. I'm sure you do too, and I love them for so many reasons. Because every time you're celebrating a birthday, I mean, think about what you're actually celebrating. We're celebrating the fact that you're still here. We're celebrating your existence, that you're breathing, that you're alive. How cool is that? And you want to know what else we're celebrating when we celebrate your birthday? We're celebrating the possibility and magic that your life and the future and that next year holds for you. Now, there's one part of celebrating your birthday that I want you to really think about, okay? You know that moment when the cake comes out? Your mom or your dad or your spouse or your friends or the waiter, they bring out that cake and the candles are burning on top and everyone starts singing happy birthday to you. And then they put the cake down, you look at the candles, you close your eyes, and you make a wish. And for just a moment, time stops. Have you ever noticed that as that cake gets closer to you and you start going inside and thinking about the wish that you're going to make, you don't even hear anybody singing anymore. You hear something inside yourself. You hear something deep from within. You close your eyes, you grab that wish, and you blow out those candles as if it's going to magically make that wish come true. And when you open your eyes, you are present to the wish. You feel excited for the year, and you can almost see all the new possibility that you could tap into in the year ahead. Well, researchers have a name for this exact moment. It's called the fresh start effect. When you make that birthday wish, you break from your past self, and this transformational window of time opens up. You think bigger. You feel hopeful and inspired. And there's some incredibly interesting research that explains why these moments are so powerful. I'm looking right now at a study from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, where they've studied the intrinsic motivational power of this fresh start effect. Researchers studied moments in our life where we feel motivated to make big changes, and birthdays are an example of that. It's as if a birthday hands you a blank slate, a clean page, a fresh start at a whole new year. And this feeling inside you ignites an intrinsic, motivational, aspirational force that's hardwired within you. It's this power to change. Now, you've experienced this fresh start effect at other times in your life, too. Just think about the new year, January 1st. Hello, fresh start effect. Now, January 1st is one of those moments where all of a sudden, last year ends. Boom, slam the door on that year, and something new opens up. A whole new you, a clean slate, an open road. This is why, by the way, so many people start a diet on January 1st. Hello, Mel Robbins. So many people go to the gym for the first time on January 1st. It gives them a natural mental starting line to cross on a new leg of the journey called life. How cool is that? You also experience this fresh start motivation with every new semester in school, the start of a new sports season. You feel like this could be our year, right? That's the fresh start effect. The birth of a child, a breakup, a wedding, a death. These are all moments in time where something ends and something else begins. And it's not only happening in the physical space, it's happening in the psychological and spiritual space. That's why so much stirs inside you, according to the research. I just realized, this fresh start effect, this is probably why I am addicted to buying new journals. Every time I get a new journal, I crack it open and I literally feel like a new Mel is about to pour out on all those open, empty pages. This phenomenon is so powerful that researchers have even created a label to describe anything that triggers that fresh start motivation that stirs inside you, like your birthday, January 1st, that new journal, a new semester at school. These things are called temporal landmarks. Now, let me explain what a temporal landmark is. A temporal landmark is a date or an experience or a physical thing that marks the passing of time. January 1st, for example, is a date. It marks the end of one year and the beginning of a new year. And when the new year begins, you cross that starting line mentally to think about a whole new you. Your birthday is the exact same thing. It's another year, another mile on the road of your life, and this creates all kinds of new possibilities about the stretch of open road ahead. A new semester is an experience that's always brimming with excitement. New friends, new experiences, a chance to think differently about who you are and how you're going to show up and what you want. A breakup or a divorce, now that's a major temporal landmark because it not only marks time, it also impacts your identity, your life as a couple before, and now your life as you after the breakup. But here's what researchers have found that I think is fascinating about what happens to your psychology and motivation and thinking. Temporal landmarks not only mark the passing of time, they open up a whole new mental accounting period. Just like an accountant closes the books at the end of a fiscal year and opens up a fresh page to begin a whole new fiscal year, the event, whether it's January 1, the first of the month, a Monday, the end of a fiscal year, or making a wish on your birthday, this landmark creates a break from the past you. It separates you from the things that you feel are imperfect, and it silences all that judgment that you have about yourself. And here's the cool thing. When you shut that judge inside you down, you open the door to a whole new vision for yourself. It creates a break from your past self, the things that you feel are imperfect about you or your life, and the things that you judge yourself for. And here's what's really amazing. When you stop judging yourself and you stop focusing on what you think is wrong with your life, you open up the floodgates to what might be. So let's go back to that moment when you make a wish on your birthday. As soon as you see that cake coming with those candles burning, you go in. You stop hearing everyone singing. You close your eyes. Why? Because mentally, a new accounting period is opening up. You stop caring about the song and the people around you and what's happening outside of you. You tune into what you're feeling on the inside, in your heart, in your soul, what you dream about, that thing that's calling from you deep inside that normally you can't hear because you're so focused on all the stupid stuff that we all obsess about. No one even has to tell you to close your eyes. You see that cake coming. You know that you can make a wish. You just do it naturally. And when you go inward, you're disrupting the circuitry of your old thinking, your old judgments, and your past habits. For just a moment, you're escaping the old you. And then you make the wish, a wish for what could be, a wish for what will happen this year, in the next year of your life. And the same thing happens when you sit down at the end of the year and you create resolutions, not the one you share with people at a party. I'm talking about the real ones that you write down in your journal. Here's another moment like that. You know that moment after a really painful breakup This one takes a little bit of time because you basically need to cry and feel bad about yourself for about a month or two, you know. And then one morning, you wake up and you realize, oh my God, I'm happy that's over. I'm better off single. And you let go of the relationship and the version of you who was holding on to it for so long. And more importantly, in that moment of acceptance, you stop judging yourself and you realize you'll be okay. No, you'll be more than okay. You're going to be great because of this. And then you start to do the work to create a better life. These temporal landmarks are a big psychological deal because something really profound happens inside of you for a second. You snap out of all the stressful bullshit that's going on and the relentless self-criticism, and you have this mental freedom, this temporary break from your normal negative thinking, and you allow yourself to consider the bigger picture. You allow yourself to envision the future you. You tap into your deepest hopes, your wildest dreams, and your most exciting aspirations. You see a vision for a better life. You see that, yes, you deserve to be happy. And that's exactly what I want you and I to experience today on episode 1 of the Mel Robbins podcast. Let's hold each other's hand and sit side by side and imagine what might be possible in the next year of our lives if we let go of the past and we hold on to our dreams. That's the invitation I'm giving to you. Allow yourself to have a fresh start. You don't have to wait for your birthday or January 1st to change your life. You can turn the page on the past and start writing that new chapter today. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to share the 3 simple steps that you can use to create that powerful change that you've been wishing, wanting, or dreaming about. The fact is, change is possible, and you can't convince me otherwise. I know you might try, but I know that it's a fact. Change is possible. It's possible for everyone, and it's possible for you. Now, we're going to talk about this in depth, but the bottom line is, if you can imagine that new chapter, there is a way to make it happen. And I guarantee you, someone else on the planet has done it. I mean, there's about 8 billion people on this planet. Someone else has faced what you're going through right now. Someone else has built the company that you dream about building. Someone else has gone from where you are to where you envision yourself going. Someone else has improved their relationship, healed their mental illness. And if someone else has done it, you can do it too. Start seeing people in the world around you as evidence of your own success being possible. I want you to start saying to yourself, if they can do it, then I can do it. Other people's success just proves that you're worthy of what you want. And more importantly, that you're capable of reverse engineering how they got there and doing the work to get it for yourself. Now, I get it. It might not happen the same way or look the same way. You might not be starting on the same starting line. And it might not take the same amount of time. But if you keep telling yourself, if they can do it, I can do it, you're going to change your mindset. And you're going to see that, yes, it's true. There is limitless success, love, money, and happiness. There's enough for everyone, and there's enough for you. And I want you to use me as an example from time to time. If Mel Robbins can do it, then I can do it. And honestly, I'm going to be looking to you for the same encouragement from time to time, because I'm sure there are things you've accomplished or experienced that I haven't. So let's agree. We're going to encourage one another through this thing, okay? I know how to create massive change because I just did this in my own life. Over the past 2 years, I've completely reinvented myself in every aspect of my life. And look, I'm not being dramatic. It's a fact. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The Mel Robbins that you're hearing right now is not the Mel Robbins that I was just 2 years ago. 2 years ago to this exact birthday, on the day that I turned 52, I did not wake up and feel like $1 million. I did not see an open road. I saw a dead end. I was not kicking ass and taking names. 2 years ago, when I turned 52, I was sucking wind. I woke up all alone. I felt lost and stuck and scared. Here's what was going on in my life. I had just been fired from my dream job. And look, I'd been fired from other jobs in the past when I was younger, but boy, at 52, that really stings. Then with COVID, the speaking and event business came to a halt. And as a small business owner, I'm responsible for the livelihood and healthcare of 15 families, including my own. So I started to panic. As the income dried up, I had no idea how I was going to continue to make payroll. And to add to that, I had people in my inner circle that betrayed me. They lied to me, they stole from me. So I just felt rocked because people that I trusted, that I had counted on, had violated that trust. That's what made me feel so damn alone. Plus, then college was canceled. Remember that? So we were all under the same roof with our 3 kids, 2 of whom were in college, and they were all anxious and angry and sad and grieving. I mean, it was like living with caged animals. I bet you felt a lot of these same things. And finally, my husband, Chris, he had just been diagnosed with long-term depression. I mean, talk about a shitstorm. I felt like absolutely everything was spiraling out of control. So here I am on my 52nd birthday with all this going on. And I wake up in the bunk room at my mother-in-law's house where we're quarantining. And I just started crying. The sadness that I had been trying to push down, it just poured out of me. And I instinctually picked up my phone and I just started filming how I felt. I figured someone out there on the internet would relate. And maybe, just maybe, they might even be able to give me some encouragement back. Now, when we come back after a short word from our sponsors, I'm going to play that video that I made on my 52nd birthday. And you're going to hear that sad, lost Mel Robbins. And I want you to hear it because I want you to know I've been there, and I've been there recently. And clearly, if I'm where I'm at now, kicking ass, taking names, going after my dreams, doing better than ever, I know how to bridge the gap from where you are to where you want to go. And later in the episode, I'm going to share those 3 steps with you that I took to make powerful changes and reinvent my whole life so that you can use those same proven, simple steps to make whatever changes you want in the next year of your life. And that brings me to our very first question about happiness from a listener named Andrea.
Hey Mel, it's Andrea. Can you talk about happiness? I can't think of a time that I have felt true happiness. I'm just living, I guess. I feel that something is missing, and I believe it's happiness.
Andrea, I love the way you framed that question. And for you listening, I'm going to put that question right back to you. Can you think of a time that you felt true happiness? Or are you like most people, that you feel like something is missing from your life and you can't quite put your finger on it? You know, when I hear Andrea's question, I can totally relate to it because I know I felt the way that she's feeling. And one of the mistakes that I was making when I felt like something was missing is I, of course, went on the search. I got to find happiness. And here's the first piece of research that I want to talk about. Research says that happiness, or that feeling that we're seeking of happiness, it's often fleeting because we are searching for happiness in the wrong places. In fact, researchers at Rutgers and the University of Toronto found that people who pursue happiness, you're chasing it, you're looking for it outside yourself, you often feel like you don't have enough time in the day. And this paradoxically makes you feel unhappy because when you feel like you don't have enough time in the day because you're constantly chasing all these things outside of you, you start to feel like you're not in control of your life. And I think that's what Andrea is talking about, that we're all chasing down some version of happiness that we think we're supposed to be chasing, right? That society has marketed some version of life to us. And that's why you probably are familiar with that phrase, I'll be happy when. We all succumb to that thinking. I'll be happy when I lose the weight, I fall in love, I land that dream job, I pay off my bills, I get into my dream school, I find the perfect apartment. And there's multiple problems with thinking like this. First of all, if you think that you'll be happier when you achieve something, what always happens is when you achieve it, you're not as happy as you thought you would be. And then all of a sudden, because you don't have this big goal in front of you anymore, your happiness plummets. And so the research is very, very clear that these big events that we're chasing, that we think are going to give us a boost of happiness, that happiness doesn't last. And there's a second reason why this kind of thinking, that you'll be happy at some point in the future, why this is really problematic. It's because you are anchoring your happiness on something that hasn't happened yet. That means your happiness is something you have to earn. Your happiness is something that's outside of you. And that's not what happiness is at all. Happiness is always within your control. Happiness is something that you want to cultivate in your life where you are right now. And the good news is, you don't have to wait to be happy when. You can learn to be happier now. So let me explain, based on the research, how happiness works when it comes to you individually. So there's this formula that's supported by the science that says you have 100% capacity for happiness. That's what you got. Your cup can be full and runneth over. 100%, baby. Happiness is for you. 50% of that capacity is genetics. That's your default. So you might be somebody that has 50% genetics that are preset to being very sunny and kind of bubbly and happy. Or 50% of your genetics might be like, meh, you're kind of grumpy. That's okay, because you still have the other 50% to play with. 10% of the rest is based on the circumstances that you're facing right now. And 40% of happiness, period, in your life right now is completely under your control. And that's what we're going to focus on, because that's awesome. No matter what kind of family you were born into, no matter what you're facing right now in your life, 40% of your capacity for happiness right now completely in your control. And so before we go forward, I want to make sure that as we're talking, that we're in complete agreement about what the word happiness means. Because when you and I use the word happy or happiness, we might be saying totally different things. There's a huge spectrum when people use this word. Researchers even talk about the fact that happiness is all over the map. Some people, when they say happiness, they mean laughing and having a good time. Other people mean fulfillment or thriving or kicking ass in life. And so you and I are going to have a conversation right now about what you mean when you say happiness. Where are you on the spectrum between laughter and having a great time to feeling completely fulfilled and thriving in life? And so in order for you and I to get on the same page, I'm going to bring a metaphor in. You know Mel Robbins. She loves her metaphors. She loves her visual explanations for these big, heady concepts. And thankfully, I got a great one for happiness. So whenever you hear the word happiness, I want you to think about an ocean. There are waves in an ocean, and that's one spectrum of happiness. And waves come and they go. And having fun in the waves requires you to jump in the waves, to get into the ocean, to decide that you're going to go have fun. But then if you think about the ocean, there are days that there's no waves at all. It's perfectly still. And the ocean itself and your ability to stand in that ocean, to float and to swim, that's a deeper form of happiness. Or what about the days where the ocean is stormy and you wouldn't dare go in? But on those days that you're on the beach, aren't you so present to the wind, to the salt, to the waves crashing on the beach? That's what I want you to think about. That huge range of how an ocean shows up. And I love this metaphor of an ocean for happiness, the waves being fun and the still ocean being your ability to just experience happiness, and you being present even on the stormiest days to the little details. I love this range because it ties right back to all of the research, but it gives us a visual. I want to start with a particular post that you put on social media that went crazy viral, and it really struck a nerve for me. And you posted this thing where you said, at 32 years old, I realized I was a child in an adult body. And this just hit deep for so many people. What did you mean?
Thank you for calling out that post. I think, for a lot of us that can be really challenging to hear that about ourselves. And for me, if I'm speaking honestly, it was very challenging to come to that awareness. And what I met was mainly around my emotions and the way that I hadn't learned, of course, in early childhood, to tolerate, to navigate, to be able to process my emotions. And in many ways, and I use this language, I think this is the part that becomes difficult, is in a lot of ways, I was very emotionally immature in the way that I handled the frustrations, the difficulties, and the stresses of life. Because the reality for me, as I think is the case, which is I think why it resonates with so many of us, is that so few of us, for many different reasons, which I'm sure we'll dive into many of which today, we didn't have those safe environments. We didn't have those emotionally attuned caregivers who themselves learned how to navigate their own emotions. So, I mean, needless to say, parenting is a large task in and of itself. And, when we don't have that safety and when we don't have someone modeling, mirroring, attuning to us emotionally, what we do then appear is like a child in an adult body.
I want to take a step back because for those of you who have not read Dr. Nicole's New York Times #1 best-selling book, which is a game changer, How to Do the Work, or you don't follow her online like millions and millions and millions of people do, can you tell everybody what your life looked like at the age of 32? Because, when you talk about emotional immaturity, it's not like you were running down the street naked, taking a baseball bat to the side of a wall, like kind of rambling gobbledygook. You were high functioning and successful. So we just give everybody, like, what does life for Dr. Nicole at 32 look like when you have this realization that, holy shit, I can't process my emotions maturely?
Yeah. And I'll be the first to say I wasn't able to even admit that or even have that language for what was going on at the time. What I did know was that I had finally arrived, or so I thought, to the end of all of this, achievement-based to-do list. To speak to your point, I wasn't, kind of dysfunctional in the very traditional sense. I had, in a lot of ways, I had the successful life, or at least appearance of life around me. I was in a partnership, a committed partnership. I had a successful practice after achieving my PhD. I was surrounded by, a network of supportive individuals. I was living in the city that I chose to live in. Everything seemingly on the outside, right, was reflecting this idea that I should feel good, or at least better than I was. So I think, as a lot of us do, my first feeling was a really low, disempowered, lack of fulfillment and shame. Because again, as I looked around, I kept almost telling myself, well, what is wrong with you, Nicole? Why aren't you, feeling good about yourself? Why aren't you feeling fulfilled? Why aren't you feeling even connected to this life that you created? So not having the awareness of why I was struggling right alongside with, at that point, the clients that I had been working with week after week, month after month, I wondering, feeling as a disempowered then clinician in the room, what is wrong? Why are so many of us stuck? Those of us who even have access to supportive individuals like myself in a therapeutic environment, why is the report I'm getting week after week, not that I'm getting better, but that I'm getting more and more frustrated, more and more shameful, more and more stuck in these patterns? And for me, it really began with exploring, what is keeping so many of us stuck. And for me, I landed on the answer being all of the conditioning, oftentimes very stress-based, very trauma-based conditioning that, was emblematic of the childhoods that most of us have grown up in, that were creating habits and patterns that, no matter how much insight, how much awareness that we had, were keeping us disconnected from ourselves, from our life, and from our relationships.
So as you are talking, and somebody's listening intently, going, wait a minute, is there a different way to experience life? Because adulthood, it's so familiar sounding that you check all the boxes. Ivy League degree, you're practicing psychologist. You are successful on the outside. You're surrounded by all these people and you're having this internal crisis and disconnect where you're going, why am I not happy? What is wrong with me? What more could there be? How can I not figure this out? I am sure most everybody listening can relate to this. And so we're going to get into what you did. But if somebody is going, that's me right now. What is something, Dr. Nicole, that you want to tell them right now about what this means if you're experiencing this disconnection from what your life is like today and what you're feeling inside?
I speaking from the perspective of having been that person. I mean, as I, was entering my 30s, I convinced myself because I too saw similar, complaints. I heard similar complaints and I almost gaslit myself in a lot of ways with this idea, like you're sharing, Mel, of this must be just what adulthood is. This might just be the circumstances of the, environments, very unnatural. I was living in a city myself that many of us are living. And it took me, becoming conscious again of the very real impact of these habits and patterns to create just that little bit of space. So what I want to offer to anyone who's resonating and has that embedded belief that this is just what life is about, or maybe, a more problematic belief, I think, for ourselves is maybe this is just what my life is meant to be about. Maybe there's something inherently wrong with me, that is translating to this lack of fulfillment, this overwhelming stress or whatever it might be for you. And so very much speaking from that person as well, I thought that something was just, off about me. I want to share, the hope of creating that space of really, and you'll often hear me break down, as far as I see the process of creating change, into two major steps. And the first step I will always note is becoming conscious. And when we become conscious of how habitual, how patterned we are as individuals, then some of us can gift us with that little bit of space that then allows us to take that next step, which is beginning to make new choices outside of those old ingrained habits, to then be able to experience ourselves differently. And I'm really being intentional with that because, again, I think the best shifting of beliefs is when we ourselves begin to create change, begin to experience life differently. Many of us, I'm sure, have listened to motivational speakers who have said, oh, you can do this, come on this side of life, of change. And it really isn't. And again, speaking from my own experience of this, we don't believe it until we do it. But when we do become conscious, or as we begin to become conscious, we can gift ourselves with that space. Of course, does not happen overnight, but over time, we can begin to then make new choices, relieving ourselves of that shame, that belief that this is just what life is all about, and or this is what my life is all about.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I love you so much. Not only because you've made a huge difference in my life, and I'm going to try to take a highlighter and call out a couple of those things that you have said that were complete paradigm shifters for me and helped me achieve level up moments in my own healing. And so I want to I want to make sure everybody heard something, which is even the awareness that you feel stuck, even the awareness that something is off, even the awareness that this isn't working is great news. Because if I'm hearing you correctly, being frustrated or feeling discombobulated in your body about your life, that is the consciousness that you're talking about?
Yes, 100%. I mean, anything that we can attune to feeling, even the lack of, because I know for a lot of us, we feel numb. For me, that was very much part of my journey, is feeling apathetic, not actually feeling much of anything. Though, to speak to your, very beautiful celebration of that awareness, the moment we start to say, okay, I don't feel anything, or I feel so depressed, or whatever it is that I do feel, when I am able to see or witness, that's what consciousness means for me, and honestly acknowledge that that's the case for my circumstances, then we are actually beginning the process of creating change.
Yeah, this is going on right now in real time in my life because we were just having dinner last night for my husband's birthday, and our daughter has asked my husband, when do you feel most alive? What experiences make you feel most alive? And after Chris answered, I turned to her and I said, I've heard you say that word alive a number of times. Where is that coming from? And she said, well, it's because I don't feel that alive in my life right now. And I think when you have those insights, you're right to go, I was celebratory because I'm trying to highlight the fact that most of us react to that insight that, holy shit, I don't feel excited by my life. I don't feel like myself. I don't feel alive. It's scary when you have that moment of consciousness.
It's incredibly scary, feeling as many of us do when we're on that blind autopilot, especially if our autopilot is driven by a state of nervous system disconnection. I often connect many of the conversations, many of the habits and patterns that we're beginning to talk about now back to our physiological body. And there actually is a state of shutdown that many of us, I found myself living in, that created, and it wasn't to say like we were going back to the beginning, right? I was still marching through life, checking endless boxes of to-do list. It wasn't that I was apathetic sitting on a couch, though. For some of us, that's how it presents. We don't feel motivated. We procrastinate. We actually can't get up and do much of anything, though some of us are still able to continue to literally just live life going through the motions. And our emotions are what makes us a human. So feeling very much, I talk about my spaceship that I was living on, the spaceship of disconnection that again began for me in childhood, does create this feeling, this embodied existence of living like a robot. So when we rob ourselves of our emotional experience of life, we're robbing ourselves, in my opinion, of life itself. But again, as often is the case, there are reasons embedded in our mind and our body that have created that experience, even of that distance, that disconnect, that apathy, that lack of motivation, that procrastination, whatever it is, that isn't a reflection of who you really are, what is meant for you in life, but again, is an adaptive coping mechanism, usually around your earliest environments or circumstances.
Wow. Let's get a definition of what happiness means in the context of this conversation, okay? Because it's really not a feeling of positivity. For me, when I use the word happy, it is a feeling of being content, present, and okay with yourself in your life. That whatever is going on the outside around you, that you have this ability to access a positive and supportive and optimistic baseline that is deep inside of you. And I think that's one of the mistakes that I made. I was always looking outside of me. Oh, when I get my bills paid, when I fall in love, when I, get into that school. And the truth is, if I'm being honest with you, I've been like kind of miserable for as long as I can remember. I was miserable in high school. I was miserable in college. I got into my dream school. I was at Dartmouth. I was miserable at Dartmouth. I then got into law school. I was miserable in law school. I then got a great job as a public defender. I liked the job, but I wasn't happy with myself. I got married to somebody that I loved, but I wasn't really happy with myself. Again, chasing on the outside. And I bet you do too. I guarantee you somewhere in your mind, you're saying to yourself, oh, if I lose the weight, then I'll be happier. If I find the love of my life, I'll be happier. Oh, if I get into that graduate school, if I pay off my debt, then I'll be happier. That's not how it works. See, I'm sure you've heard people talk about the fact that happiness is an inside job. I didn't know what the hell that meant. And so we're going to dig into what that means. And in fact, I want to bring a metaphor into the conversation. I got to credit my friend Hoda over at the Today Show because she gave me this metaphor literally a couple days ago. I was on the show on Friday, and right before we started taping, I was talking with Jenna and Hoda, and we're sitting on the couches, and Hoda said this phrase, and I didn't know what the heck she was talking about. She said, pop up in the eye of a hurricane. I'm like, what? What do you mean pop up in the eye of a hurricane? And I guess she had been covering a story where they were in a hurricane. And she said, well, Mel, have you ever seen the eye of a storm? And I'm like, no, I never have. I've seen the swirling kind of tornado hurricane thing before when they see it on the news. Well, she said, well, my gosh, if you pop up in the middle of one, it's crazy quiet and still. Like there's all this chaos on the outside that you see when you see a hurricane or you see a tornado or you see this huge storm, but in the eye of it, It's still. And when she described this, I immediately latched onto that visual. Now, I, of course, have never been in the middle of a storm like that, but I started to think about the fact that life can feel like this gigantic storm, right, of chaos and things that are spinning around you all the time. And there are times in your life where things can feel completely out of control. And in my life, if I'm being really raw and real with you, I was the hurricane. Like, I was constantly in a state of chaos internally. Yeah, I was smiling on the outside, but things were spinning around on the inside. And usually it was this negative feeling like something was wrong or something bad was going to happen. I was always just spinning and spinning and spinning. And if you can't relate to that, I bet you can relate to the fact that often in life, it feels like you can get swept up by the things that are going on around you. And so one of the things that I discovered in the past 3 years is that when I took a really hard look at myself, I'm the one that has been the hurricane of chaos. That my mood was often out of control because my mood was dependent on things that were outside of me. I was so easily turned into a bad mood or feeling disappointed or being stressed out or being sad or being all these things that I didn't want to feel. And so when Hoda shared this with me on Friday, I thought, you know what? I knew that I was going to talk to you about happiness today, and I thought, I got to bring this in because I do think that this connects to happiness, and here's how. The eye of the hurricane, that stillness in the midst of something chaotic going on outside of you, that is what I'm talking about when I talk about happiness. That no matter what is happening or who you're with, that you can access this quietness inside of you. Because learning how to be still and content, that is powerful. It doesn't matter who you're around or where you are. No matter what is happening, what's not happening, learning how to access that inside of you, to me, is the secret to happiness. So let me just ask you, can you do that? Like when things are swirling around you, when you feel a bad mood get triggered, when life gets super stressful, are you able to come into yourself and tap into this centeredness, this okayness? Can you let positive energy flow in, even when it feels like things around you are kind of chaotic? Well, if you're like Mel Robbins, the answer is no, but I want to be able to do that. You can, and that's the good news. You can find your strength. You can find your center. You can find the ability to be content even when there is a storm brewing. And I didn't know how to do this. My life felt like that hurricane. Your life might feel like that too. When I look back, my life was nothing but a relentless grind. Seriously. Like, it was a grind to pay the bills. It was a grind to deal with the constant anxiety. It was a grind to be in a relationship where I felt always annoyed with the person that I was married to. My commute was a pain. Every single thing felt hard. It felt like a fight. And the only relief from that hurricane that I felt, which was my life for many years, was basically pouring a drink at night. Or I would focus on the weekend that was coming up. Okay, if I can just get to the weekend, I got to get through this work week, get to the weekend. It's just 2 days from now. Then I can step outside of the stress of this. I can escape my life for a minute. I can drive the kids to all the things they need to do over the weekend. I'll blow off some steam at a barbecue with some friends. I'll sleep in, and then I'll get right back to it. Or Chris and I would be able to take a short vacation to go visit my parents or his parents, and we'd escape our life for that. But my daily existence, I would describe by 2 words. I was frustrated or I was disappointed. And like I said earlier, I thought that making money would make me happy. I thought that if I just pay off these bills, if I can just breathe a little bit, I will find happiness. And the truth is, there is a certain amount of money that will make you happier. Because if you've ever been in the experience that I've been in my life where you can't pay your bills, there is a crushing level of stress that you feel because you are constantly worried about money. And so it is true There is a certain level of money that will make you a little bit happier. But here's what's also true. Once you can pay your bills, once you can make the ends meet, making more money doesn't solve the underlying problem, which is you don't know how to be happy. I think that's the bottom line. I didn't know how to be happy. That's why I was looking outside of myself. That's why I was thinking that something else would somehow make me a happier person. But here's what you will learn. You can listen to a bazillion podcasts. You can try to improve your life all day long. You can chip away at all the problems that you have on the outside. You can get your bills paid. You can get yourself out of debt. You can figure out how to make your marriage happier. But that's all outside of you. Once you handle all that stuff, you know what happens? It just magnifies the fact that you haven't dealt with what actually isn't working on the inside. And that's what happened to me. Once I worked my tail off to fix everything that wasn't working, from the issues in my marriage to the crushing debt that we used to face to helping my kids through the various issues that they had, I had to face the person in the mirror. Once you solve all the things that are wrong around you, the hurricane's supposed to disappear, right? Wrong. Because the hurricane, when it comes to happiness, is inside of you. And that's exactly what I came face to face with 3 years ago. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you. So make sure you subscribe. Mwah.